In the 6th century AD, at the heart of the glorious Byzantine Empire, stood Constantinople, New Rome, jewel of the East, a city of unparalleled wealth, power, and architectural splendor. It was the pulsating capital of civilization that saw itself as the inheritor of Rome's divine mandate. But beneath the glittering domes and marble facades, a different kind of power held sway over the masses, the thunderous spectacle of chariot racing in the mighty Hippodrome. This wasn't mere entertainment. It was the lifeblood of the city, a political battleground, and a social lightning rod where loyalty was absolute and passions ran as hot as the Anatolian sun. Imagine, if you will, that the fervent allegiance you might feel for your favorite sports team could morph into a furious, unstoppable force. A force so potent it could ignite a civil war, bring an empire to its knees, and utterly redefine the course of history. That is precisely what happened. In a tale, stranger than fiction, we uncover how the fan clubs of the Blues and Greens, initially rivals on the track, became the unlikely protagonists of an epic struggle against Emperor Justinian himself. This documentary, Nika Riots, when Byzantine Circus fans nearly toppled an empire, will journey into the heart of this ancient metropolis to expose the complex interplay of popular passion, political grievances, and imperial power that culminated in the most destructive urban revolt the world had ever seen. From the roar of the crowd to the whisper of rebellion, through 27 main sections, we will meticulously unravel the events of the Nika Riots, a shocking testament to how the seemingly trivial can become catastrophic, and how the people, united by injustice, can shake the very foundations of the mightiest empire. Get ready to witness the game that almost ended an empire. In the annals of history, few cities burned as brightly as Constantinople in the 6th century AD. The beating heart of the Byzantine Empire, it was a metropolis unlike any other, a strategic jewel perched on the Bosporus, linking east and west. Its colossal walls, shimmering with golden mosaics, protected a city of unimaginable wealth and fervent faith, a vibrant tapestry of cultures, languages, and colossal ambition. Known as New Rome, it was home to 500,000 souls, a testament to imperial power and ingenuity. From its bustling harbors on the Golden Horn to its grand avenues, Constantinople was a cauldron of activity, a place where emperors ruled with divine authority and where the pulse of an entire civilization throbbed with an electrifying, sometimes volatile, energy. This magnificent capital, seemingly unassailable, was about to face its greatest test. And at the very core of this colossal city lay its magnificent Hippodrome. More than just an arena, it was the soul of Constantinople, a gigantic U-shaped structure capable of holding over 60,000 spectators. Imagine the roar, the collective breath of an empire. Here, the emperor sat in his imperial box, the kathisma, directly connected to the people by a private passage from the great palace, a living deity among his subjects. This was where spectacles of unparalleled scale unfolded, triumphant parades, public executions, and the most anticipated event of all, chariot racing. Adorned with towering Egyptian obelisks and statues brought from across the conquered world, the Hippodrome was a stage where the might of the empire and the passions of its people converged, a place where the line between entertainment and political statement often blurred, sometimes perilously so. Chariot racing was not merely a sport. It was a visceral, high-stakes ballet of speed, skill, and sheer brutality. For horses, a quadriga, thundering around 7 laps of the Hippodrome spina, each turn a potential disaster, each crash a terrifying ballet of splintered wood and flying hooves. The charioteers, often enslaved men or former gladiators, were the superstars of their age, their names whispered with reverence and awe across the empire. Their daring maneuvers, their iconic colored tunics, and the sheer danger of their profession made them legends. The crowds were not passive observers. They were a raging, collective entity, their cheers and jeers echoing off the massive stone walls, their emotions raw and unrestrained. This was the opiate of the masses, a spectacle that consumed the entire city's attention, blurring social divides in a shared, explosive frenzy. Yet, beneath this exhilarating surface, deeper currents of loyalty and division were already brewing. This intense passion coalesced around two dominant factions, the Blues, or Venetoi, and the Greens, the Prasino. While ostensibly chariot racing teams, their origins stretch back centuries to ancient Rome, evolving far beyond mere sporting clubs. Each faction boasted its own dedicated charioteers, trainers, and an army of fanatical supporters. Their rivalry was fierce, consuming, and absolute. These weren't just fans. They were organized brotherhoods, deeply ingrained into the social fabric of Constantinople. Their distinctive colors, azure for the Blues, emerald for the Greens, were worn with pride, visible on clothing, banners, and even etched into street graffiti. The Hippodrome was their battleground, but their influence permeated every corner of the city, dividing neighborhoods, families, and even imperial politics. These factions were the empire's oldest, most powerful, and most volatile street gangs, waiting for an opportunity to explode. The Blues and Greens were far more than simply sports teams. They were fundamental pillars of Byzantine identity, transcending the arena to become proxies for deeper societal divisions. Supporting a faction meant aligning with specific political, social, economic, and even theological viewpoints. The Blues often drew support from the aristocratic and landowning classes, adhering to Chalcedonian orthodoxy, while the Greens found their base among merchants, artisans, and the common populace, often sympathetic to Monophysite beliefs. They were a powerful, self-organizing force in the city, controlling large segments of public opinion and often acting as instruments of both imperial policy and popular unrest. This wasn't merely about who won the race. It was about class, power, and faith. The allegiance to one's chosen color was absolute, carving Constantinople into two fiercely opposed camps, a powder keg waiting for the smallest spark to ignite. Presiding over this fervent empire was Emperor Justinian I, who ascended to the throne in 527 AD. A man of immense intellect, boundless ambition, and an iron will, Justinian harbored a singular, audacious vision: to restore the Roman Empire to its former glory, to reclaim the lost lands of the West, and to unify the entire Christian world under his rule. He launched vast military campaigns, initiated monumental building projects, and undertook the ambitious legal reforms that would become the Corpus Juris Civilis. In his early reign, he sought to consolidate imperial power, often clashing with the entrenched interests of the powerful factions. Justinian saw himself as God's chosen instrument, an emperor destined to lead a glorious resurgence. Yet, this grand vision, however noble, came at a staggering cost, and his relentless pursuit of it would soon bring his empire to the brink. By Justinian's side, a figure of extraordinary influence and controversial origins stood as his unwavering ruler, Empress Theodora. Born into the lower echelons of society, an actress and even rumored courtesan, her past was scandalous by imperial standards. Yet, Justinian defied all convention to marry her, recognizing in her not only beauty, but an astute political mind and an indomitable spirit. Theodora was no mere consort. She was Justinian's closest advisor, a powerful voice in matters of state, law, and religious policy. Her strength, intelligence, and ruthless pragmatism proved invaluable, particularly during times of crisis. She wielded immense power, often against the wishes of the Senate and aristocracy, championing the rights of women and the less fortunate. Theodora, the former actress, now commanded the Byzantine stage, a formidable force whose resolve would soon be tested in the most extreme circumstances. Despite his grand vision and formidable leadership, Justinian's policies began to sow seeds of widespread discontent. His relentless military campaigns and monumental building projects, while glorifying the empire, drained the treasury, leading to heavy taxation that burdened the common people and the wealthy alike. His efforts to impose religious uniformity, particularly against the Monophysites, alienated large segments of the population, feeding into the existing sectarian divisions championed by the factions. Furthermore, Justinian's attempts to curb the violent excesses of the blues and greens through arrests and harsh penalties infuriated their fervent followers. The empire, under the weight of ambition, economic strain, and social repression, was a simmering pot. The magnificent Hippodrome, once a symbol of unity, became a pressure cooker, and the deep-seated grievances of the populace, now inflamed, were about to find a dangerous, explosive outlet. The division wasn't confined to the boisterous stands of the Hippodrome or the dusty streets of Constantinople. It permeated the very heart of the Byzantine Empire, the imperial court. Within the gilded halls of the great palace, where the fate of millions was decided, the colors of blue and green found their champions. High-ranking officials, powerful senators, and even members of the imperial family openly aligned themselves with one faction or the other. This partisanship wasn't merely a matter of sporting preference. It translated into political maneuvering, patronage, and fierce rivalries that complicated governance. Decisions were often mired in factional squabbles, as ministers sought to advance their chosen color's interests, creating a climate of suspicion and making Emperor Justinian's rule far more challenging than it appeared from the outside. The empire, supposedly united under a single divine ruler, was subtly fracturing from within, setting a dangerous precedent. Long before the seismic shock of the Nika Riots, Constantinople was a city simmering with discontent and violence. The rivalry between the blues and the greens wasn't just passionate, it was often deadly. Street brawls were a common, terrifying spectacle, erupting spontaneously in crowded marketplaces, narrow alleys, and even outside churches. These weren't mere fan disputes. They were gang wars where young men, fueled by adrenaline and factional loyalty, clashed with swords, clubs, and stones. Daily life was routinely disrupted, as citizens learned to fear the sight of an approaching rival group. Imperial authority, though formidable on paper, struggled to contain this endemic urban violence. The city's watchmen and the emperor's guards were often overwhelmed, creating a pervasive sense of lawlessness. This chronic unrest was a stark indicator that Constantinople, beneath its glittering facade, was a powder keg awaiting a spark. By early January 532 AD, Emperor Justinian, determined to reassert control over his restive capital, decreed a harsh crackdown. A series of high-profile arrests targeted members from both the blue and green factions who were implicated in the recent spate of urban violence. The message was clear: imperial justice would be meted out equally, without favor to either side. These arrests culminated in the sentencing of 7 men to death by hanging. Justinian hoped this decisive action would restore order and deter future transgressions. However, rather than quelling the unrest, this show of imperial might backfired spectacularly. The public, already wary of Justinian's perceived heavy-handedness and high taxes, saw these arrests not as justice, but as an affront. The impending executions, regardless of faction, ignited a deep, simmering popular outrage, pushing the city to a critical breaking point. On the execution day, January 10th, 532 AD, a chilling spectacle unfolded in the public square. 5 of the condemned men were successfully hanged, their deaths serving as a grim warning. But for 2 of the 7, a blue and a green, fate intervened in an astonishing, almost miraculous twist. Their ropes snapped. They fell, bruised but alive, from the gallows. Imperial guards, intent on completing the sentence, quickly rehoisted them. Again, the ropes broke. This bizarre and repeated failure sent a ripple of disbelief and awe through the assembled crowd. For many, it was an unmistakable sign of divine intervention, a message from God himself that these men were not meant to die. The surviving pair were quickly spirited away by monks to sanctuary in a nearby church. This miracle ignited a spark of hope and, crucially, a shared sense of solidarity between the previously warring blues and greens. The miraculous reprieve of the two condemned men became the unlikely catalyst for an unprecedented alliance. For decades, the Blues and the Greens have been bitter rivals, their animosity fueled by sports, politics, and street violence. But witnessing a shared injustice, followed by what they perceived as divine favor for both a blue and a green, transcended their old hatreds. Their shared grievance against Emperor Justinian's heavy-handed rule and high taxes now burned brighter than their traditional enmity. From this astonishing twist of fate, an extraordinary unity began to form. Whispers of a common cause turned into shouts. The historical enemies, shoulder to shoulder, now had a single, powerful demand: clemency for the surviving men and an end to Justinian's perceived tyranny. A new, terrifying force had awakened in Constantinople. On January 13th, 532 AD, the Hippodrome was packed for the chariot races, a spectacle meant to distract and entertain the masses. Emperor Justinian and Empress Theodora were present in the imperial box, expecting the usual roar of partisan support. But what began was something altogether different. As the races progressed, a low rumble started, building in intensity. The Blues and the Greens, now shockingly united, began to chant. It wasn't for their charioteers. It was a demand for justice. Long life to the Blues and Greens, morphed into an incessant, powerful cry directed at the emperor himself. Nika! Nika! Victory! They bellowed. Initially, it was a plea for clemency for the condemned men, a demand for change. But with each echoing roar, the meaning shifted, growing bolder, more rebellious. Nika was rapidly transforming from a simple chant into a rallying cry for revolution, challenging the very legitimacy of Justinian's rule. Justinian's initial response to the defiant Nika chants was a fatal miscalculation. He dispatched a herald to the Hippodrome, offering minor concessions, but failing to address the core demands for clemency or reform. This insufficient gesture ignited the powder keg. The crowd, already fueled by shared outrage and the electrifying chant, felt their pleas were dismissed with contempt. What had begun as a massive, unified protest quickly spiraled into uncontrolled violence. The Hippodrome gates, once a barrier, became an exit point for a furious, surging mob. Spilling out into the streets, the rioters no longer merely chanted. They began to act. Their fury was directed at the symbols of Justinian's authority, public buildings, the city's prisons, and even elements of the imperial palace complex. The first day of the Nika Riots had begun, marking the terrifying descent of Constantinople into anarchy. Over the next harrowing days, the Nika Riots consumed Constantinople in a horrifying inferno. The initial fury of the mob escalated into an uncontrolled conflagration as entire districts of the magnificent capital were deliberately set ablaze. Iconic landmarks, grand churches like Hagia Sophia, opulent palaces, public baths, and countless private residences became fuel for the rioters' rage. Smoke choked the sky, casting a pall over the city, and the crackle of flames mingled with the screams of the terrified and the roar of the rampaging mob. Vast swathes of the metropolis, Justinian's jewel of an empire, were reduced to smoldering ruins. The very heart of the Byzantine world was bleeding, teetering on the brink of total destruction. The emperor and empress, trapped within the palace, watched in horror as their grand vision for the empire threatened to burn to ash around them. Constantinople was not just protesting, it was burning. As the fires of Constantinople raged, licking at the very foundations of his imperial authority, Emperor Justinian found himself at the precipice of utter despair. The city, once the jewel of the world, was a hellscape of smoke, ash, and the terrifying roar of a populace turned savage. News arrived of key buildings burning, of the very Hippodrome, the heart of their culture, being desecrated. Justinian, the mighty emperor, whose ambitions stretched across continents, crumpled under the weight of this chaos. He paced his scorched palace chambers, his face pale, defeat etched into every line. Whispers of escape, of abandoning the throne and fleeing the capital began to circulate among his frightened advisors. The thought of losing everything he had built, of his empire crumbling before his very eyes, seemed an almost unbearable reality. The once indomitable ruler was on the verge of surrendering to the mob. But from this moment of imperial paralysis, a figure of extraordinary will emerged. Empress Theodora. As her husband contemplated flight, she stood before the panic-stricken court, her voice cutting through the fear like a sharpened blade. With an unwavering gaze that shamed the men present, she delivered one of history's most defiant speeches. "Royalty is a good burial shroud," she declared, her words echoing with absolute resolve. "Though flight offers safety, it is not an option for one who has worn the purple. I will not survive the day when I cease to be saluted as empress. May I never live to see the day when those who meet me do not hail me as mistress." Her words were not just a rebuke. They were a thunderclap, a categorical refusal to yield, igniting a flicker of courage in the hearts of those ready to flee. Theodora, the former actress, now embodied the very spirit of the Byzantine Empire. Theodora's unwavering resolve was a lightning bolt, galvanizing Justinian and his court. Now, the empire needed hands to execute this renewed defiance. Fortunately, Justinian had two of the most capable and fiercely loyal generals at his disposal, Belisarius and Narses. Belisarius, the heroic last of the Romans, had already proven his military genius on distant battlefields, reclaiming lost territories for the empire. His reputation alone instilled fear in enemies and confidence in allies. Narses, a brilliant eunuch of Armenian descent, might have lacked Belisarius's battlefield renown, but possessed an equally sharp strategic mind and an unwavering personal loyalty to the imperial couple. Together, these two disparate but equally formidable men would become the instruments of imperial retribution, their skills pivotal in navigating the complex and dangerous task of crushing the rebellion. While the imperial court gathered its resolve, the rioters, emboldened by their seeming success and egged on by certain elements of the Byzantine aristocracy eager to see Justinian fall, escalated their demands. From merely expressing discontent, their goals shifted dramatically to outright regime change. Amidst the ashes and fervor, the mob declared a new emperor. Hypatius, a nephew of the former emperor Anastasius, dragged reluctantly, or perhaps strategically, into the spotlight. Hypatius was hoisted onto a shield in the Forum, a symbolic coronation by the very people who sought to dismantle Justinian's reign. The shouts of Nika now intermingled with cries for Hypatius Augustus. The riot had transformed into a full-blown civil war, with a legitimate imperial heir now sitting, however precariously, on a makeshift throne. This act made the imperial response not just necessary, but utterly unavoidable. With Theodora's unyielding spirit as their foundation, Belisarius and Narses put their brilliant minds to work. They understood that engaging the vast, chaotic mob across the burning city would be a bloody and drawn-out affair, potentially leading to further destruction and loss of imperial control. A more cunning strategy was needed. They devised a plan to concentrate the rebel forces, to lure them into a controlled environment where their numerical advantage could be negated. The target was obvious: the Hippodrome itself, the very crucible where the riot had begun. Under the pretense of a public address, perhaps an imperial concession, or even a return to the festivities, the word was spread. The message was carefully crafted to play into the rioters' desires, promising a resolution, drawing them back to the colossal arena, unsuspecting of the horror that awaited them. The trap was meticulously set, the stage prepared for a final, decisive act. The plan was executed with chilling precision. The unsuspecting thousands, high on their newfound power and the promise of a new emperor, poured into the Hippodrome, eager for whatever spectacle or proclamation awaited them. But as the colossal gates clanged shut behind them, sealing off every exit, a terrible realization dawned. This was no celebration. This was a death trap. From multiple entrances, Belisarius's battle-hardened troops, clad in heavy armor, and Narcissus's loyal Gothic mercenaries stormed the arena. What followed was a swift, brutal, and utterly horrific massacre. The cheers turned to screams of terror as swords flashed, cutting down the trapped, unarmed populace. The air filled with the cries of the dying and the clash of steel, crushing the rebellion in a single, merciless hour of imperial ruthlessness. The greatest stadium in the world became its largest graveyard. When the dust settled and the screams finally died, a horrifying silence descended upon the Hippodrome. The scale of the slaughter was almost unimaginable. Estimates vary, but contemporary accounts suggest that anywhere from 30,000 to 50,000 people lay dead within the arena's walls, a staggering number for any historical conflict, let alone a riot suppressed in a matter of hours. The Nika Riots have been crushed, but at an almost unspeakable human cost. The purple Theodora's shroud of royalty had indeed found its burial ground, not for an emperor, but for tens of thousands of ordinary citizens. This brutal act served as a chilling, unequivocal message to any who might dare challenge imperial authority again. The empire had proven it would go to any lengths, endure any horror, to maintain its absolute power. The streets of Constantinople ran red, a testament to Justinian's ruthlessness and his ultimate survival. From the ashes of the Nika Riots, a new Constantinople was destined to rise, grander and more magnificent than ever before. Justinian, having survived the greatest threat to his rule, emerged from the crisis not broken, but emboldened. He embarked on an ambitious, almost visionary, rebuilding program, determined to erase the scars of rebellion and demonstrate the empire's enduring strength. The city's damaged infrastructure was repaired, new public buildings commissioned, and a sense of imperial renewal swept through the capital. The crowning jewel of this massive reconstruction effort was the Hagia Sophia. In just 5 years, the world's largest and most breathtaking domed cathedral would stand as a monumental symbol of imperial power, architectural genius, and spiritual devotion. Constantinople, like a phoenix, rose from its devastation, proclaiming Justinian's triumph and ushering in a golden age of Byzantine artistry and splendor. From the ashes of Constantinople, a new, more absolute Justinian emerged. Far from weakening his reign, the Nika Riots served as a brutal crucible, forging an emperor whose grip on power became ironclad. The emperor, with Theodora's steadfast support, used the chaos as a decisive pretext. Those senators and officials suspected of even tacit sympathy with the rioters, or perceived as potential rivals, were purged with swift and chilling efficiency. Their lands were confiscated, their influence annihilated. The riots had revealed the deep fissures within the empire's elite, and Justinian, with calculated ruthlessness, cemented his position, ensuring that dissent would not only be quelled but preempted. This period marked a profound consolidation of imperial authority, centralizing power directly into Justinian's hands, making him the undisputed master of Byzantium. This brutal consolidation extended directly to the factions themselves. The Blues and Greens, once formidable political entities capable of challenging the imperial will, found their power utterly shattered. The leaders who had incited or capitalized on the riots faced summary justice, their executions serving as a stark warning across the entire empire. Their extensive networks, which had woven themselves into the very fabric of Constantinople's civic life, were systematically dismantled. Thousands of their most ardent followers were arrested, exiled, or worse. The Hippodrome, once their stage for political theatrics and violent protest, was now under unprecedented imperial scrutiny. The vibrant, often unruly, political voice of the circus factions was decisively muted, diminished back to primarily sporting clubs. Their capacity for future organized resistance against the emperor was extinguished, turning the spectacle of the races back into mere entertainment. The Nika Riots, though brief, left an indelible scar on the Byzantine psyche and etched a profound lesson into the annals of imperial governance. It remains a pivotal event, a stark reminder of the inherent fragility of even the most formidable power and the terrifying volatility of public opinion when coupled with deep-seated social and political resentments. For future emperors, the memory of the Nika uprising served as a perpetual warning, never to underestimate the power of the people, nor the complex interplay between sport, politics, and power. It underscored the constant need for vigilance, for meticulous management of the populace, and for swift, decisive action against any threat to the imperial throne. The riots fundamentally altered the relationship between ruler and ruled, ensuring that while the Hippodrome might still echo with cheers, its political heartbeat had been irrevocably silenced by the specter of Nika. The echoes of Nika, conquer, reverberate through the annals of history, a chilling reminder of how close the mighty Byzantine Empire came to collapse. What began as a mere dispute among chariot racing fans, fueled by long-simmering political grievances and imperial overreach, escalated with terrifying speed into a full-blown civil war. We have seen how the fervent passions of the blues and greens, once confined to the Hippodrome, spilled onto the streets, transforming Constantinople into a battlefield and nearly unseating one of the most ambitious emperors in history, Justinian the Great. The Nika Riots stand as an extraordinary testament to the dangerous intersection of popular passion, perceived injustice, and the raw, often volatile, power of the people. This ancient story teaches us that no empire, however grand or powerful, is immune to the forces of collective discontent. It's a powerful lesson. How seemingly minor events, amplified by deep-seated frustrations, can spark catastrophic consequences. The fires of rebellion that engulfed Constantinople nearly consumed an empire, yet also forged its future, demanding a reckoning with the fragility of power. The roar of the circus fans may have faded, but the lessons of their rebellion endure, offering profound insights into the human spirit and the eternal struggle between power and the people.